Hey, so this video is going to be on the Man of Steel, and I'm not referring to Superman. I'm referring to the one and only Joseph Stalin. He is mentioned, of course, in Atheism Kills, Barak Lurie's book, which is, of course, what this video is also on, and he is by far the highest contributor to Barak Lurie's supposed kill count that he has derived for atheism. So I'm going to be tackling what I agree and disagree with about Barak Lurie's assessment here, and so let's get into it. Before we get into any of the rest of my disagreements with him, let's get one thing out of the way really quickly. I do very much agree with Lurie on one thing. Stalin was an atheist. That is pretty obvious, and I don't know how anyone could make much of a case that he wasn't. And there's a number of reasons I know that, given his policies against the East Orthodox Church within the Soviet Union, given statements that he made throughout his life against Christianity and against religion that identified him as an atheist clearly. And most of all, because he came from a seminary school, kind of like me. He came from a very religious background, at least. His mother forced him to go to seminary school, and he hated it, and he eventually got expelled for reading communist literature. So, I mean, yeah, he was quite obviously an atheist. But that is where me and Lurie's areas of agreements pretty much end. Though there might be a few others. But first, before I get into it, let's first do a quick dissection of Joseph Stalin's life so we can have a little background here for what we're talking about. I've read a lot on Stalin before, and I know a lot about, both his early life and later life. He was born in Georgia, which was, of course, a province of the Russian Empire. He was born to in a poor village. He had a webbed toes, I believe, and he had a shortened arm. He was very small. He was bullied, and though he did perform well in school, he was generally had a hard time getting along with other kids, despite being intelligent. But fast forward some years later in life, and he went to seminary school to become a priest within the Orthodox Church. Of course, he got expelled for reading Marxist literature. And then he became a communist revolutionary. Those years in the where he was combating the Tsarist regime, for certain brutalized him to a great extent. He survived multiple Siberian exiles, which Siberian exiles were the equivalent of essentially a death sentence. Most of his fellow communist revolutionaries did not survive them. But Stalin did via both intelligence and ruthlessness. He employed all sorts of just unfathomable tactics to survive. Like he would use orphans, I think, as informants when he was trying to keep wary of the Tsar's spies. And he did other things that were just truly, unfathomable when you look how he survived. But that was where he met his first wife, was one of his Siberian exiles, whom he had, I forgot. I know he had one kid with her. I believe maybe he had more. But anyways, she died fairly early on in their marriage. And he said that after that, the last bit of goodness in him had died, and his last bit of love for the world was gone. And he wasn't joking at all. After that, Stalin started transcending from being a bad person to being almost just pure evil. He continued in his activities as a Russian revolutionary, which he specialized in bank robberies and other criminal activities for the Marxist revolutionaries. That eventually, of course, led to him rising up through the ranks in the Russian Civil War as well, with the Red Russians versus the White Russians. And eventually, fast forward down the line, he became one of the top Soviet leaders, top communist Soviet leaders, and eventually did end up replacing Lenin as head of the party and head of the country. As the leader of the Soviet Union, he, of course, committed unfathomable atrocities, including the Great Purge, including his 5-year plan against religion, in which he tried to decimate the East Orthodox Church and its influence on the country. He committed the dekulakization, if I pronounce that exactly right, which was an act against peasants and some regions that he saw as resistors towards him. He committed mass industrialization projects and mass collectivization projects. He committed later in the war, in World War II, against the Nazis, I believe it was called Order 207, against his own soldiers, in which they were shot for retreating. He also allowed war crimes to go unpunished on the part of his soldiers in Germany, who raped many German women, basically to an extent that's matched in all of history. And last but not least, of course, the crimes he committed toward his own soldiers after the war, who, as their reward for winning the war for him, were sent off to the Gulag. Um, and I'm probably missing a few here, but these just, this is how he amassed a kill count as high as 20 million. Obviously, he deserves his spot as one of the top 10 most evil people in the world. Really, there is only one positive thing I can say for Stalin and all this, and that is that he did defeat Hitler. In fact, that's the one bit of credit he's given by some historians and a lot of Russians today, is that if Hitler had won the war and taken over the Soviet Union, because of his view as Russian people as being racially inferior to Germans, he would have either enslaved or exterminated them. And so, as terrible as Stalin was, the truth is he may have been an evil that was necessary to counterbalance Hitler's evil. But also, avoid getting into all that now. That was just kind of to give a brief overview. Now to get into Stalin's relationship to communism and atheism, and why he absolutely does not, though, deserve to be made as the poster child for atheism. Okay, well, as of all the crimes I just listed off, there's one that is directly attributable to his atheist views, and that is the 5-year plan that he instituted against the Eastern Orthodox Church. It was obviously one of the most brutal, it was the most brutal act of an atheist ever done against Christians. Stalin will probably always be the number one atheist for evil atheists ever made, throughout all of history. I know he killed thousands of priests. I don't know what the exact number is. If you want to put it all into perspective, the number there could still range up into the tens of thousands, maybe the millions even, in terms of what the overall effect of his plan, the 5-year plan he had was. But it wasn't the main contributor to Stalin's overall list of crimes, though it was significant. The main, probably the things that he's best remembered for are his economic industrialization and his wartime policies. Now, the Great Purge and the Great Famine, of course, referring to a famine in Ukraine that Stalin, he was one of the main contributors to the deaths that happened there because he deprived them of resources during the famine out of his extreme socialist and communist policies, as well as just his own personal vendetta. And if I am, just one FYI, if I'm slightly leaving out a few details here or there, I'm trying to, sum up a lot of things quickly, so bear with me just a little bit. But of course, these were economic and totalitarianism policies. None of these directly or indirectly related to his atheist views. In no way. I mean, how could and let me ask you this, if you disagree, how could a Christian have acted any differently in those circumstances? I mean, assuming everything else about Stalin was the same, if he was a Christian, how would that have stopped those policies from transcending? He still would have been a radically evil person from the extreme life circumstances he had in life, as well as his extreme Marxist ideas, not just socialist, communist ideas, extreme totalitarian Marxist ideas. So those policies still would have happened. And his wartime policies, which were done both out of sheer desperation to stop the Nazis and out of a complete disregard for any life of his own soldiers or of the German soldiers even, because, he committed unfathomable war crimes against them as well, against his German POWs and against German citizens after the war. Again, this was mostly out of just pure spite and evil on Stalin's part towards the Germans for what they were doing to the Russians, as well as just his general lack of regard for human life as well. Now, again, that's not attributable even to atheism, or to socialism, to communism, and even, maybe totalitarianism is the only one you could derive from that. There's no way atheism could have contributed to that. There's no way Christianity could have contributed to that. Nothing can. Stalin's psychology is something almost beyond what can be comprehended. If you read, his biography and the experiences he had in life, there was something different about him from as Winston Churchill put it, Stalin is an unnatural man. With him, there will always be great trouble. So to try to sum it up to any of one of those factors is literally foolish and impossible, which is, of course, unfortunately, what many, many people do try to do, though, including Lurie. he tries to sum up and say that Stalin's atheism was a core foundation of why he was the psychopath and the demented person that he was, which is just simply not even close to being true. It'd be as ridiculous to say Christianity is what contributed to Hitler's view, which I'll get into that later on my view on my video on Hitler and his religious views. But what I'm just saying here is that yes, I mean, Stalin was an atheist. Yes, Stalin was a communist, but either one of those really can't even begin to compare to what caused Stalin to do his crimes. And I have yet to see any evidence whatsoever that could even hint at that. If you disagree with me on, maybe perhaps how some of his views may have contributed to some of his crimes against the church, maybe you think it contributed to some of Stalin's, acts and personality. I could somewhat, humor that. But honestly, anybody who ever tries to make the case to you to say that Stalin's crimes were solely a cause of his atheistic views or even of his communistic views, just to be honest, just to be fair, even to communists, but especially of his atheist views, is truly just either completely ignorant or lying. And unfortunately, in the case of Barak Lurie, who is a very smart person, I have to say he's probably going with the latter. So again, that was, I know, kind of a long rant, and hopefully it will probably be the easiest one I could do on this book because I know a lot about Stalin, so I didn't really have to do a lot of research on this one. Just had to do a couple of refreshers. But I hope you enjoyed this, and if you disagree with me, feel free to put it in the comments section. Tell me what you think, and otherwise, just thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.